Hello, my name is Hugo Prévost. Welcome to SVGA, your PC retro gaming podcast. This is episode number 6. And as always, I'm joined by my good friend Robert Hills. Hello, Robert.
Hello, Hugo. How are you today?
I'm fine, and you?
A bit warm, but humidity's back. Weather.
Yeah, like the summer that will never end. This week, I want to start by apologizing to you, Robert, because I have to do a bit of explanation first. This week we decided to play Wing Commander. We decided to try a space shooter with a simulation twist, if we can call it like that. And
A pretty legendary game and something foundational to a whole bunch of stuff that you actually like. But go on.
Yeah, so this is a game from 1990. It was the not really the beginning exactly of the genre, but close to the beginning, and close to a time where PC capabilities were quite limited in terms of graphics, in terms of controls, in terms of everything you can think of. And so we went on GOG, where we usually find the games we want to play, and I've decided to give it a try. And everything went well until the first mission, basically. And so what happened was, and this is something we're going to talk about later too, is it's not that the controls were hard, it's that the game is hard, at least for me. I'm used to old games. I'm used to difficult mechanics to a certain extent. And so this very first mission, you patrol a zone of space, and there's some enemies that come by, and you have to shoot them down, and that's pretty okay. There's a very interesting damage management system, and like I said, we're going to talk about it later, but there's also asteroids, and
what happened with the asteroids?
Yeah, what happened with the asteroids? I got a few asteroids in my face, and I died 3 times in a row. And the game is the game is made in a way that when you die, it's not. First of all, when you get an asteroid in the face, it's not like, oh, you're gonna lose some. You're going to take some damage, and your hull is going to be there's going to be cracks in the hulls, and you're going to see a percentage saying, okay, your hull is down to 35% or something. No, it's like you get an asteroid in the face, your ship explodes, there's a cutscene, and then you die, and then there's another cutscene where there's a funeral. And I don't know if you can skip it. I'm not sure. But yeah, so I died three times. And I got the cutscenes 3 times, and I've been playing for 5 minutes at that point. And this is basically including the debriefing that we get, where your commander explains what you're going to do, where you're going to patrol, and so I've tried. I've talked to you about it. I was getting a bit frustrated, and this is basically the same reason why I don't play games like Dark Souls. Because and excuse me the profanity, because I suck at Dark Souls, and
that's hard to profane.
Yeah, it's a hard game, sure, but and I'm not used to play with a controller. I'm a really really PC guy, but yeah, with Wing Commander, it was like I was feeling that the learning curve for the not necessarily the difficulty of the game, because shooting down enemies is okay. I mean, I can do a dogfight just fine. It's getting to master the limitations of the systems that we play in, and you can also say that I'm not good at that game, and that's maybe true.
Maybe.
Surely.
Well, I might go a little beyond maybe, but
yeah, I'm not good at Wing Commander. The first one, I haven't played the other ones. I know there's one with, I guess the third one is with Mark Hamill, that there's some FMV, and I know how much you like FMV. But yeah, so I was really, really bad at Wing Commander. So I've decided to switch.
Yes. And you also forced it upon me, but
I've said that we could talk about the systems. We could talk about the graphics, the music, which is really great for the time. We could talk about the story, but we couldn't really talk about the gameplay because that wasn't good enough to get to mission number 2. And so I've suggested to switch or to talk about Freespace, which is another sci-fi simulation game.
Yes.
A really good one. And so today we're going to talk about both Wing Commander and Freespace, because otherwise the episode would last about 5 or 6 minutes.
Yes.
Yeah. So maybe I'm going to start with the beginning, because you talked a bit about the foundational role of Wing Commander. Could you tell us a bit more about this?
Yeah, well, it's essentially a space simulation, and if you played any kind of arcade style space shooter flying game, you were essentially playing some sort of child of Wing Commander. You go in, like, if you played TIE Fighter, Freespace. I mean, you can even look to one of your favorites, your current favorites, Elite Dangerous. There are direct lines you can draw from Wing Commander. The way, for example, radars work, and it's just it sets some foundational pieces down for essentially what people expect when they open up a space shooter. And I mean, the basic story is you're part of a human-led alliance, and you're fighting against the Kilrathi, which are these tiger-like species, and you basically get into a bunch of space battles. And it's interesting because the game actually it has two endings, where you go, if you're either really good or really bad at the game, different things happen. So essentially the humans either win or lose. I think we know which way you would have trended in that particular storyline, but it's really interesting in that it's 1990, and you can, like, even down to when you have to land somewhere, you go to a communications panel and you say request permission to land, which was something that in Elite Dangerous, for example, it's still there, and it's that was 2016, 17, whatever it was.
2015, I think. Well, yeah, 25 years after Wing Commander.
Yeah, and there are, just playing it, you can still feel all that sort of. You can feel basically the history that everything is built on. So it's a really interesting game for me in that way. And I gotta say, I actually really enjoyed it, because it was one I had played a lot when I was of age, a child. Which I think I actually mostly played Wing Commander 2, which came out 91, I believe. But it was, I still quite enjoyed it. I was playing it for fun just before we recorded, just to get back in the swing of things.
And I can see, as I said before, I can see where the fun is in the game. You've talked about communication systems, for example. I've seen just the way I've read the manual, because at this period you had to read the manual. There's a lot of lore building. They talk about fighting tactics. They're talking about just not necessarily stuff that is essential, because usually it's okay, you have to move like this, you have to shoot this, you have to use the system this way, and then okay, this is what you'll need to win. And now it's okay, there's a quiz on fighter tactics, there's some stuff about finding a third alien race, and it's really like a journal, basically. And so you get through this and you get a feeling of it's a living world. It's not of course, it's quite limited because it's all on paper. Well, in this case, on the screen, but still, at first it was on paper, of course, and you won't necessarily see everything that's been talked about in the manual, everything that's been evoked. But you get this impression that there's a world out there, and you're only a part of this intergalactic war. And I feel like I was talking about systems. You get this, and this is a brilliant. I'm gonna be able to say it with my wonderful Quebecois accent. But yeah, so there's a really well thought way of getting around the limitations of the system, because basically the game cannot be handled at full screen. Even if it's a resolution of something like 4:3, I mean, pixels, not the ratio, but anyway, this was an attempt at a joke, but and so this.
I'm sorry to kill your joke like that.
That's okay. But yeah, so it's a really, really small screen, but you have to think about the fact that in 1990 there was uh, basically it was Windows 3.1, I think, it first released on DOS. So it really have to think about like I said, the limited capabilities of the time, and so they split the screen in two. Basically, the part that is in the higher up of the screen is where the action takes place, and this is basically the only place where the game has to render sprites and explosions and asteroids that gets in your face at the last second. And at the bottom of the screen, you get the cockpit, and of course, you see your hand, but you also see the systems. You can check the damage on your ship. You can check the weapons that you have. You can switch weapons. It's already a bunch of shortcuts on the keyboard, even if and once again, even if they're so limited that they tell you that if you want to use your joystick, which will basically have two buttons, you have to press both buttons in order to change speed, but only one button, of course, to shoot. And it's already well thought out. But yeah, so I can see the complexity of the thing. It's just that once again, I got killed 5 minutes in.
Yeah,
but yeah, it's really interesting how you've talked about Elite Dangerous, and we could talk at length about the fun, and I say here in quotes, factor of Elite sometimes. But this is not really a retro game, so maybe we'll pass on that. But yeah, you can see how those systems were passed on, and it has become the de facto way to present space simulation. Is that, well, any serious space simulation is that you're going to need to navigate around your cockpit or your ship to be able to use those systems in order to boost the immersion factor into the game.
Yes. Yeah, well, and one of the really interesting things I found was sort of how, I guess, static just the way that information is presented. Like, you have your two screens, you've got your middle radar screen, and you've got one that shows targeting and one your map, and then those you can switch them. But the basic layout of everything, while it's kind of modular, is basically the same as what was set out 30 years ago, which I find fascinating, that we sort of, this is how it's done, and that's just how we do it now.
Well, I don't know if it was based on real systems, but I'm guessing when you find something that works, you keep it basically until you find something else that works better. But if you take the radar, for example, the first time I've played Freespace, about 10 years ago, maybe 15 years ago now, it was hard to understand how, for example, basically it's a 3D space represented on a 2D plane, and because you're in space, of course, you're not, even if you were in the air, it's not a top-down shooter. It's in 3D. So you have to understand how the external ring, for example, is what is behind you, and so on. But it takes about 5 minutes to understand, maybe 10, and then you're good to go.
It's very intuitive once you kind of start to. You just spend a little time. Like, it's not something that makes sense on looking at it, but once you're sort of in that immersive space where you're trying to fly and look at the thing, it makes sense, because it just, your brain clues into how it works.
And basically, they also give you lots of pointers. There's some arrows. There's always a targeting reticle. There's all those systems that are here to help you to be sure to point to your target or to your enemy, basically.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't mind, I'd switch to Freespace because like I said, I couldn't talk to you about, it's in Mission 9 in Wing Commanders or something. So
just before we do, one of the things
yeah, sure.
I also found was interesting was sort of the way that the pre-mission stuff is all set out. And I don't know how much time you spent talking to the different people and sort of navigating around the ship. Not that there's only like 3 or 4 screens, but I thought that was also one of the interesting things that I think works really well on it is there are the pilots you fly with are characters you're introduced to that when one of them dies, and you probably hadn't got to this point yet, but if you're on a mission and your wingman dies, they're dead for the rest of the game.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a chalkboard with all the sort of kill counts and everything, and they get KIA next to their name, and it's interesting that they tried to they actually tell a pretty interesting story, and the animations, while rudimentary, are I thought really well done. Even just I really like the right before you fly when the alarm's going off and everyone's running to the hangar. I don't know. I think that works just really well.
I think that I've saw this animation a few times elsewhere. It's something like an iconic scene in the video game industry. I remember specifically seeing this maybe in a montage or something like that, where you see this scene where it's all going faster than what you see on the screen usually for briefing, for example, or when you talk to characters. And it really gives you a sense, or okay, it's time to go now, and it wouldn't be as exciting, I think, if you had the time to take a walk, maybe stop by the washroom. You know what I mean? It's
right, yeah. There's no sense of urgency. Once you get the briefing, it's like, oh, now we got to go. Shit, like.
Yeah. It reminds me of. Have you played Star Fox?
Only very briefly.
Okay, because at the start of every, the original one on Super Nintendo, at the start of every mission, there's this alarm sound, and okay, it's time to scramble. You have to go now, and then you fly out of the ship or the base or whatever, and then you're up in the action. You have to shoot, you have to fly, and it's basically the same thing. And it didn't really happen in Freespace, or doesn't happen, of course, in Elite, but that's another another topic. But maybe once again, before we switch, maybe mention that the game was developed under the supervision of Chris Roberts. So we're talking about Wing Commander, of course. Chris Roberts, who was 20-something years old at the time, I believe, something like that.
Yeah, that's about right.
Maybe I'm just gonna click right. Yeah, he's 52 years old now, so he was 22 at the time the game came out. It's quite impressive what he was able to do with his team at the time. And so basically he stayed at the helm of the entire series, and then he went on to do Freelancer, which is another space simulation game, but now with this sort of open world vibe. And when you can basically choose to follow the plot, or you can choose to be a merchant, you can choose to align yourself with a guild or with the bandits or whatever you like, and upgrade your ship and so on. And it's really, really interesting. I think it's came out in 2001. And he still has a following up. 2003, yeah. Okay, yeah, and we cannot not mention the fact that Mr. Roberts directed the Wing Commander movie.
Yeah, which for some reason is in a just blank spot in my brain. I can't recall anything about it.
I remember Freddie Prinze Jr. in it, and
this is coming back.
That's about it. Yeah, it wasn't really good.
No, I don't.
But now,
it's not a good sign if the designer of the video game is also the director of the film.
Yeah, usually it doesn't go well. Well, basically, movie adaptations of video games will flop. There is no. I mean, you can have movies about video games, but every time they've tried to translate from, well, translate, maybe not the right word, but transpose, there you go, a game to the big screen, it doesn't work because there's not this interactivity factor. I mean, I think we've talked about the Doom movie last time,
Yeah.
and that's a perfect example of what not to do when you have in that case, a multi-billion-dollar franchise to go to play with. So yeah, so he did Wing Commander, but now he's also doing Star Citizen, which is once again a space simulation.
I mean, do what you know, right?
Yeah, exactly, and it feels like well, it's quite ambitious. That's to say the least, and it's been in development since basically forever. I think 2000, what, 12, 13, something
That's a
like that.
long time, but yeah.
Yeah, and it's still not out. Well, I mean, there's a playable version of it, but it's just gonna click right quick. Oh yeah, the oh wow, the game was announced in 2012, and yeah, so it was supposed to come out in 2014. Oh god, it's something like Space Duke Nukem Forever. Um,
Ooh,
yeah,
that's
so
that's one we'll definitely have to talk about in a later episode. But yikes.
yeah, probably, but still, I think it's still better as a game that Duke Nukem Forever, of course, but it's
It's
still
very low bar.
yeah. But the interesting thing is they did a Kickstarter for this, and they got a 2 million, I think, a little bit over 2 million, and then they started to sell ships in the game, so you can buy a ship, and sometimes it can cost a few $100s, which is a lot for a video game. But yeah, so and they got a few hundred millions this way, and they keep this. They're still selling ships, but the game isn't done yet. They're supposed to have a single player campaign. There's a shooter game inside it. There's of course a multiplayer aspect and everything, and it's once again extremely ambitious, but it's not really playable yet. So yeah, we'll see.
Yeah,
So,
well, we may have to do an update later on, but podcasting might be a thing of the past, and it'll just be sort of like mind telepathy or something.
yeah, like in the Demolition Man movie when they try to have sex. But anyway,
Oh
that's
boy,
we're
that
really,
is not
really
where I thought you were going with that, but there we are.
we're really straying away from the topic here. But yeah, let's talk about Freespace.
Yes,
Freespace, as I said, I've played it. Maybe even what it came out in '98, maybe 20 years ago. I don't know. I remember being really young when I played it. Space simulator game developed by Volition and published by Interplay. I think both companies are dead now.
I
Have
think
been
so. Yeah, or
bought.
swallowed up by.
Yeah, exactly. And so basically, what happens is you are once again part of a human alliance who is fighting against. This time is the Vasudans, which are something like. Not really an animal, but they look like a mix of big of apes and insects. I don't know.
Yeah,
It's a
it's
bit
they're
strange.
strange looking.
Yeah, and so it's been, I think, 13 or 14 years since we've been fighting the Vasudans, and it's a bit of a stalemate basically. And what happens is there's in the intro sequence, which I remember at the time I was mesmerized by the colors and the
It's
action and
actually
everything.
it's really funny because when we switched to this,
Yeah.
you said I was like, oh, okay, I don't think I've ever played that one, but I'll give it a try. And then I watched the intro and like, oh no, I've played a lot of this.
Well, that's good then. So yeah, in the intro sequence, you see a human pilot fleeing something we don't know what, and then there's these huge battleships that comes out of hyperspace, or what do they call this?
Um, it's yeah, they're
There's a
not
special name
wormholes.
for the upper space.
Yes.
Anyway, node space, I don't know, whatever, and so these huge battleships come out of the subspace. Anyway, and then they start attacking the pilot, and they start attacking the space station where it was trying to find refuge. And this is what you get. And you start the game and you still fight the Vesudans in a few missions, and then eventually you learn about this new enemy, the Shivans. And with their shield technology, with their super fast ships, super dangerous ships, and basically the rest of the game is trying to resist, to counter the Shivans, and eventually trying to save Earth. And the interesting thing with this was, for me at the time, was it was the first game where there was no cockpit on the screen.
Yeah.
And basically, of course, you have a HUD, you have your interface with your systems and everything else, but there's no, like in Wing Commander, you have half the screen is taken by basically the view of the interior of your ship. Now, there you don't have anything. And to be able to see the to have the entirety of the screen dedicated to seeing stars and ships and explosions and dogfighting and everything else, it was really, really impressive at the time.
Yeah, it and I mean, the difference in graphics, obviously, over the 8 years has just like huge leaps and bounds.
Yeah, of course. Well, now it's not sprites anymore; it's real 3D models.
Yes,
and so you have all this. The way, like how the systems can be damaged. You have a lot of subsystem, as in Wing Commander, of course, but now it's okay. You can call in a ship to repair you. There's a way to the way, like, there's a in the bottom left of your screen, there's a view of your target, the ship you have targeted. It can also be a container and anything that you target, and it's like a mini camera instead of just being an image. And when you shoot it, for example, you see, of course, you see the projectile in your main screen, but you can also see your target getting hit on the lower left corner. And for me at the time, it was all these little things that were incredible to my mind, seeing all this go on in 3D and with sometimes dozens of ships. And yeah, it was really, really fantastic to see.
Yeah, and it's one that it really, and it really takes that sort of next step in a big way. I think from, like, you can kind of, the big space simulators were like Wing Commander, then you had your X-Wing TIE Fighter, that series, and then this one, I think, in its own world and everything, really took that to the next level.
Yeah, exactly. And they've created this whole. I suppose it's the same thing in Wing Commander. I've read a bit about the story online, but where you're in the middle of this conflict, and once again, you're not really the hero. I mean, you're important, yes, but there's some team management. You can call in wingman. You can. Of course, you have your escort missions, for example, but it's always the impression that you are a part of the machine. And yeah, you could die, but in the real war, you'd be replaced. And there's this feeling of helplessness because through the game, I mean, at first you fight the Vasuders. Oh, there's a patrol with a few fighters. Oh, you've shot them down, and oh, there's a medal. But and now it's, oh, we've lost an entire world. Oh, we've lost some cruiser or destroyer, and oh, there's nothing we can do. And there's a lot of these missions where, oh, you have to escort this ship, or you have to protect this thing, and the Shivans come in, and there's just blast everything away. And you have this impression, oh God, I failed. What did I do wrong? And then in the debriefing, it's like, oh, there's nothing you could have done. oh well, it's
Yeah, which is interesting the concept of a game is just that, like, well, you actually couldn't win. Good try though.
yeah, exactly, and it's I think it's the best way, in my opinion, to get someone involved, because there's of course there's the games where there's a progression from A to B, and every mission is a step forward. Every mission, we've got this this new information that we got. And we have to find this bad guy somewhere. In a way, it reminds me a bit of I think it was Modern Warfare, the first one, the Call of
Right.
Duty series, where there's this mission where you're trying to find a bad guy, and when you leave on a chopper, there's this nuke that goes off, and you see everything, every other chopper gets getting destroyed basically by the blast wave, and then your own helicopter is downed, and then you wake up ish, and then you die. Uh, and that's it. This person that you play through, that you play as for 3 or 4 missions is dead, and it's a way to challenge the expectations of the player. I think that's what works best in Freespace, amongst other games, of course.
Yeah. No, and it's a good way, like you say, of drawing people in, and yeah, it gives the impression of stakes, that there is something, there's something to be lost.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. And I don't know if you've played a bit of Freespace 2 also, or just maybe the first one.
I only played the first one in this case.
Okay, because there's a thing later in the first one where the ship where you're stationed, the Bastion, I think, and there's all this sense of camaraderie. Just okay, you have the sense of belonging to something, to some place. It's like being on a on a ship in the Navy today, in the U.S. Navy, for example, and you're aboard a carrier, for example, and then the Bastion is destroyed in a fight, and then you have to transfer to another ship. And I remember feeling this sense of loss, because you spend, and you don't spend really a lot of time about the ship. Is basically the briefing screens where you get, you have to go there and you have to kill this, and that's it. But you can walk around in the ship because the menu is the interior of the ship. And like in Wing Commander, I really like the way where the place where you can save and load your game, which is basically a dormitory.
The bunks, yeah.
Yeah, the bunks. And so you click on a bunk, and then you see a body there, and it's your save game. And it was really, really interesting. I haven't seen this before, or in another game. So really, really an interesting thing to do with the instead of just clicking on save and entering a name and then enter OK, and your game is saved. And
yeah, so, I mean, there's not many save screens where there's a bucket collecting water dripping from the ceiling.
Exactly.
But in Wing Commander.
Yeah. And so in Freespace 1, you lose your ship, your carrier vessel. And in Freespace 2, the intro sequence shows that said vessel that was destroyed. Now it's something like 32, 38 years before. But yeah, so there's this sense of continuity, the sense of being part of something, something bigger than ourselves, but you still feel at home, if we can call it that way.
No, I want to talk. I think that's a good way of putting
it. Yeah, I want to talk a bit about the control scheme, maybe. I think we've played Freespace and Wing Commander on modern joysticks with something like 100 buttons.
Yes. Well, mine only has 15, I think.
Oh, still.
Several. Quite a few.
Did you use the keyboard for Freespace for the controls, or just the joystick?
I used a combination. just because some things I find it's just easier to hit the button on the keyboard with my left hand rather than a button. It kind of depends, but I did keep a bunch of stuff on the keyboard, like your jump drive and all that other stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, and I did too. I mean, I had the main fire button, of course, and the alternate fire button on the joystick, but I thought that rebinding everything was a bit hazardous. The game wasn't designed for a joystick that was going to be conceived 20 years later. So
No.
it's a bit. So I kept the keyboard. I played. Oh yeah, that's another thing I wanted to talk about. So I've played on my laptop because I discovered that my PC was not too powerful, but too advanced in a way to run Freespace 1. Freespace 2 was running okay on my main computer, but I have two 27 inches 4K screens at home for my tower. And when I've tried to launch Freespace 1 with a resolution of 640 by 480, I think, it crashed. It really wasn't able to resize, to take into account, I think, two screens.
Right. It's just too much.
Yeah, too much. So I've decided to switch my laptop, which was really fine. But yeah, so I think we're depending of the game, of course, but and there was a bunch of graphical changes from Freespace 1 to Freespace 2. Once again, Freespace 2, if you want to play it today, there's an installer that you can use. We'll put the link under the episode on Piev. But so yeah, we're getting to a point where it sometimes can be hard to play a 20-year-old game.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
In some ways, it's actually easier to play DOS games than sort of early 2000s games. Because just certain like DirectX and stuff existed, but because things have changed so much, it just some things just do not play nice together anymore.
Yeah, exactly, and it can be a bit frustrating to try to find everything online to try to, there's forum thread from 2007. Will it help me? It's 13 years later. It's something, and there's also supposed to be a way to play the Freespace 1 campaign in Freespace 2 with an open source thing, and I tried to get into it, and it was complicated, and it's like you said, there's a point where there's this point between maybe 1995 and 2005 or 6. There's this 10 years where the architecture of the computers, the way that Windows worked, for example, the way that you had to get DirectX 9 or maybe not 9, maybe DirectX 5 or something instead of DirectX 6, then it would work. And it's really, really complicated. And like you said, it's even easier to play DOS games because it's been, playing Wing Commander on my Windows 10 computer was fine. I mean, didn't have any problem. The game recognized my joystick. Everything was fine. But yeah, so we're in this space now where it's a bit weird.
Yeah, and it's especially difficult when you get to less popular games, or whatever. Because this is obviously a bit of a tangent, but when you're trying to play things of a certain age, if they're not super popular or popular enough that they've been re-released to sort of work in the more modern architecture of things, you're in for a very difficult time.
Yeah. And I know a few people, mostly online, but I've met one once at a place in the West Island called Eco Depot. I don't know if you heard about it. It's on the side of the highway. And
oh, yes. I know the one.
They sell a bunch of stuff, and they also sell games. And so I went there, and it was really the first time I've met another retro gaming enthusiast for the PC, and we've talked a bit about our favorite games and our favorite YouTubers and so on. And he told me, "Oh, what computer do you use to play these games?" And I was picking up, I think, Elite 2, and I was picking up some other stuff, and he said to me, "Oh, before I could answer, he said to me, "Oh, I have all these old computers from the '90s at home in a room, and I try to maintain them, and I try to find hardware for them." And I answered him, I mean, well, I buy them on GOG, or I buy them online where they get re-released, or otherwise I don't use the CD. I don't even have a CD drive in my computer, so I just buy the box to have the box. And I don't know if you felt pity for me or something, because there's this bunch of YouTubers, mainly, for example, LGR, where you can do a 45 minutes video about, oh, I'm going to change this card for this one, and I've bought this custom made card online to play some 1992 game, for example. And so there's all this subculture of really, really, really enthusiastic people that really love 90s gaming. And I'm afraid to say I'm not part of this, really. I don't have the time or the space or the money for it. So it's basically, I mean, we did some slightly more obscure games. I remember, can you remember Biomenace?
Oh, yes.
But yeah, so I think that's one of the reasons why we stayed basically with better known games, and I don't think we'll really delve into extremely obscure ones, because it's going to be a pain to get them running, basically.
Yeah. Certainly open to, doing certain things, but if it involves new hardware, or, some of the ways you have to, well, if you replace this DLL file with this one, and then if you, open it in administrator mode and turn off all your firewalls, you might be able to get it to work. And it's just like, I don't know.
Yeah, it's
maybe a bit far.
And I mean, it's not like we're running out of good games, games to play. It's something. I mean, we before we started the podcast, before the very first episode, we talked a bit about what games we would like to play, and I think we listed 20, something like that, at least. And we could certainly list 50 more. There's a lot of them being re-released. There's a lot of them being rewritten to be compatible with Windows 10, or some that are what we call abandonware, where they're free online, and usually they work. Not always, but usually they work. So it's another option for us. Robert, well, thank you very much for today. Will you recommend Wing Commander and or Freespace?
I would absolutely recommend Wing Commander, if for no other reason, so that listeners can write to you and tell them how they made it to Mission 2.
Yeah, exactly. You have to basically slow down and evade the asteroids, and you'll be better than me.
But in all seriousness, I actually really enjoy Wing Commander, and it's not expensive on GOG. I don't think I paid $5 for it, so it's worth it. Freespace also very good.
Yeah.
I actually enjoyed Freespace less than Wing Commander, which we didn't actually get to in this episode. But
but I mean, we have time if you want to talk about it. I mean, it's
not super deep, but I found that the limitations of Wing Commander made it more interesting to me than the ones on Freespace. Freespace was just, I don't know, too polished.
Oh, wow. Okay.
It was still good. It was just, I don't know. I found the difficulty and the oldness of Wing Commander more compelling. Maybe I'm just broken in the brain. It's hard to say.
I mean, that's a very interesting point. But yeah, I could. I mean, I have to admit, I would also recommend Wing Commander. Maybe not the very first one, and don't know if the second or the rest of the series is easier, or don't want to say better because, well, I've died in the first mission, so who am I to judge? But yeah, maybe give it a try. Just don't watch the movie, maybe. And as for Freespace, go with Freespace 2, maybe more than Freespace 1. It's easier for the to get it running. I think it's easier if you want to try the open source installer I've talked about. You give it a try. There's a lot of people still cranking up mods and missions and texture packs and everything else. But yeah, just, well, get yourself. I mean, I think you can play Freespace on the controller or with your mouse. But yeah, if you have a joystick, it's better. But yeah, I was feeling maybe my nostalgia was a little bit misplaced. Maybe it was the fact that on my laptop, I think my version of Freespace 1 was on the minimum graphic settings by default.
Oh.
Even if I tried to put it at maximum detail, if I felt like it was a bit muddy. Maybe it's just me. Maybe it's just the fact that it's nearly it's 22 years later. But yeah, Freespace, if you want to give it a try, it's still a good game, good story. I remember there's a mission near the end of Freespace 1 where you manage to steal a Shivan fighter, and you have to fly it to the main Shivan battleship, which is called the Lucifer.
Yes.
Aptly named. And then you have to fly into one of the fighter bays. And just being able to do this, just being able to see that it's not a solid piece of whatever texture they use for the ship, but it was open in a way. Just being able to do that at the time was so nerve-wracking and so incredible for me that this mission was completely crazy. But yeah, so if you want to give it a try, give it a go. Like you said, Wing Commander is really, really cheap. I think Freespace is usually available for, if you want to buy both games, it's about $5 usually on GOG. And so yeah, give it a go, give it a try. Let us tell us what you think about it. And thank you for being here, Robert, of course, with me this time again.
Always a pleasure.
And thank you
for that one time with the Phantasmagoria. We don't talk about it except for every episode when we bring it up.
Yeah, I mean, I may have another FMV game for you soon. We'll talk about it. Okay. And yeah, so thank you everyone who is listening right now. Of course, you can catch up on the other episode on our website on pf.ca, sorry. My French came out rushing. And so you can also find us on SoundCloud. We're on iTunes, yeah. We're on Spotify and basically everywhere where you can listen to podcasts. So see you next time.